Welcome to the Alchemist Manifesto, a podcast with Maria Ovando and Daniel Topete. We are two friends holding space and making time to have holistic and humanizing prácticas and charlas with the aim of alchemizing our individual experiences into shared healing and wisdom. The amistad that produces this podcast emerges from our shared commitment to social justice as teachers and scholars in the fields of critical and relational ethnic studies, and of course, our creative and everyday efforts to imagine better worlds with our loved ones, communities, and spirits. Rather than a conventional written manifesto, our podcast welcomes you to an evolving, living, and breathing journey rooted in the beauty of alchemy through amistad and the palabras, cuentos, and testimonios that emerge in this sacred ceremony of bringing our spirits together and transmitting them with you.
We channel a welcome via the spirit of learning from our daily practices of walking and in being in communion with ancestors, with the words of the late and powerful Chilean singer, Victor Jara, who reminds us in the song Plegaria a un labrador to Levantate y mira la montaña, de donde viene el viento, el sol y el agua. Tú que manejas el curso de los ríos, tú que sembraste el vuelo de tu alma. Levántate y mírate las manos. Para crecer, estréchala a tus hermanas y hermanos. Juntos, éramos unidos en la sangre. Hoy es el tiempo que puede ser mañana. In this ancestral sound, may we look to the earth for guidance in making today, the tomorrow we hope for, and may every spiritual and ancestral energy that tunes in here feel the frequencies of love and liberation we vibrate out in this Alchemist Manifesto. Sending love and peace your way. We are both so humbled by the heart-filled reception we have experienced in releasing this podcast into the world. Through your listening, we have been streamed way beyond our humble expectation, and it is this emerging community that clears away the light pollution for us and brightens our night sky with a constellation of stars. Estrellitas who are made of amigas and amigos, familia, estudiantes, colegas y comunidad. While we do ground our discussion in our academic work, we wanted to engage comunidad beyond the gatekeeping and inaccessibility of knowledge production, so often propagated by the systems of higher education. Your listening, engagement, and care via direct messages, emails, and text messages has proven to us that this experiment in engaging beyond the gatekeeping firewalls of traditional models of sharing knowledge within our respective fields is not just worthwhile, but as many of you have informed us, urgent, vital, and necessary in these pandemic times. While research articles, book chapters, reviews of books, and or other forms of publishing knowledge often take years on end and rarely reach folks with the immediacy of their times, we arrive here to share in the delicate, fragile present moment, aiming to leave bits of ourselves in our wake and prioritizing this archive information as a way to be more immediate, fragile, and sincere in our reach. While difficult, this is our intent to be guided by our internal desire and spirit. This episode consists of two segments. The first is a conversation. In it, Danny and I discuss the methods of teaching with heart and how they're rooted in day-to-day practices that exceed traditional forms of certification and program. The core of the conversation is located in our shared practice of walking meditation and how the activity allows us to move our insecurities and alchemize them into capacious meditations, either at the top of a mountain overlooking Tongva land, finding bliss in euphoria, or in feeling the light breeze and aiming to be in relation to our internal communities, our lungs, heart, blood, intestines, and bodies. Inspired by the words of Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh and their poem entitled Walking Meditation, we start with, "Take my hand, we will walk. We will only walk. We will enjoy our walk, without thinking of arriving anywhere. Walk peacefully, walk happily, Our walk is a peace walk. Our walk is a happiness walk. Then we learned that there is no peace walk, that peace is the walk. There is no happiness walk, that happiness is the walk. We walk for ourselves. We walk for everyone. Always hand in hand. Walk and touch peace every moment. Walk and touch peace every moment. Each step brings a fresh breeze. Each step makes a flower bloom under our feet. Kiss the earth with your feet. Print on earth your love and happiness. Earth will be safe when we feel in us enough safety. A central theme of our discussion is how these activities fuel us and allow us to feel better rather than numb our hurt and trauma. Danny calls it bliss. I call it tranquilidad. Regardless of the name, what's positive for us is that it's not drunkenness or a hazy buzz. In this decolonial sobriety, we then equip ourselves to teach and share our bliss and calm with students. Aside from reading articles, uploading things to Canvas, or scheduling the semester, we hold dear that these practices are not just forms of getting to the work, but if integrated into our lives, are just as vital activities in creating holistic and humanizing classrooms. In our world, the classroom does not just flourish with the content acquired externally from the class. It also blossoms with the rigorous lessons we find in reaching inward in our daily lives and sharing this. And it is rigorous. Trying to stay healthy during a pandemic is a serious concern. The mental, emotional, and psychological journey to get to this act of walking meditation can be grueling. We share not to articulate a perfect way of doing things or an idealized way of doing things, but instead to share the annoying pebbles that get in our shoes, the tough incline that can burn our calves, and of course, the bliss that awaits with a view, and the generosity of gravity in bringing us back down to earth. We share our learning as we go, with humility and with the intent of connecting. After this conversation, there will be a short silence. We invite you to breathe and sit still in that quiet. Danny talks about stillness in the conversation, and we want to share that moment of quiet and stillness with you. Once that brief, fleeting silence ends, our second segment will begin. But unlike previous podcasts, it is not a conversation. It is Danny and I sharing palabras with our ancestors. These two pensamientos emerged after walking meditation and with the intent to connect with our elders and ancestors who have passed. We offer them gently and without much context, because as we hope it becomes clearer and clearer, the most powerful context in our lives is what is left unsaid, unspoken, and in communion with our inner and deepest worlds. The most powerful context, after all, is our spiritual context. With this in heart, we welcome you to eavesdrop. Enjoy. There's so much things that we do that don't show up on like certifications. Like for instance, you could get an online certificate that shows that you know how to teach online, but there's also all these other forms of preparation that we do to teach that I want to acknowledge right now. And all this kind of like self-care, personal care that we're talking about. One of the things that Danny and I both do is we go on long walks, obviously masked and socially distant and not mixing households, by the way. But we both have been walking and meditating and strictly quarantining, and we've been creating the podcast during this month off from work. And both of those all of those practices are meant to, have a connection with spirit, earth, and our capacity to create. How do all these things, Danny, inform this kind of start of the semester? What does walking teach you, and how does it help you as a teacher? How does meditation help you? How does creating help in gearing you up here?
Man, I feel like we're so connected, man. It's like I don't think we really talked about this before. And when you asked this question to me, I'm like, I've been really intentional lately on my walks in this kind of almost meditative practice. As I mentioned before, right? These traumas that I've kind of almost inherited and experienced in this educational system kind of makes me question a lot of, you know, my legitimacy as an instructor. And I feel like a lot of times, especially when I'm depressed or feeling anxious about certain things, that I've been using it as almost an excuse to not do it, right? It's almost I give myself permission to not do these things because I just feel like it's not worth the anxiety, it's not worth the depression. And I almost convinced myself that, you know, I don't want to do these things in the first place and what have you. But recently I have been using this kind of almost meditation, this intentional meditation. And I think about there's a little trail that I have right here. It's called the Saw Pit Trail. It's not the most beautiful thing because you're basically following, what do you call it?
The dam?
The dam. Yeah, you're basically following the dam on one side, and then the other side is just, but you know, houses, and then you get up to the mountain, and then you see the whole, basically the whole valley, and that's a very almost peaceful thing, and it's a little bit over a mile, and I kind of walk up because it's pretty steep. I walk up, and I think about, you know, what is it I, you know, the other day I was thinking about an assignment, and I was just like, okay, if I wanted to do this one thing, how would it go? And then I would walk up and I like allow myself to think about like the feelings of like you're not good enough. I allow myself the feelings of like you're not smart enough to think of these kinds of things and kind of lean into it. And then on the way down, using gravity, thank God for gravity, I run down. And I I'm not a very great runner, and I kind of use that almost restriction in my body as a kind of almost to fight that mental block and say like, okay, I'm going to use these meditative practices like counting my breath and leaning into those feelings and what have you to basically unblock myself, unblock that mental block, right? And it's been helping me a lot. It's been helping me a lot to kind of just lean into it, let it go, and be okay with the struggle, right? Being okay with the struggle of like, this is hard. This is hard for me, right? And to really feel like, okay, I'm not gonna stop, because that's what I've been telling myself, that it's been okay for me to stop when things get hard. And using this kind of meditative practices when I'm walking has really helped me to I feel like, you know, again, it's making my body stronger, but I think it's making my mind stronger. It's making me think about the potential that I have within myself if I just tap into it, right? If I just allow myself to keep going when it gets hard. And you know, it has been, you know, really, even days like days like today, I was like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. And when I do, when I get up to the top of that mountain and I see it, it's almost like a feeling of euphoria, because it's not always easy to just, okay, I'm gonna go for a walk now, even if you're tired, even if you're this, even if you're that. So all of these like things, I convinced myself that I didn't want because I was too afraid to do it, right? Or I was afraid of the rejection, or I was afraid of like what that would mean for me, what kind of work that would mean for me, and I felt inadequate. Again, using this kind of meditative walk has been really crucial for me in this, and just meditating at home, you know, just sitting in you know, my office and doing these meditations has allowed me to confront that fear of even sitting quietly, because if you ask my partner, that was one of her pet peeves. It's like, man, you can't even go to sleep without the television on. And it's true. It was one of those things that I'm afraid of the silence in my head, or the voice in my head that's gonna say like something that I'm not prepared for. But slowly, it's been making.
Yeah, I have a question. Like, could you describe that euphoria that you feel when you reach the top of essentially the San Gabriel Valley? Like, what is that? Could you describe it? Like, if you could take a second real quick and just like, what is it that you feel? What is it that like you're working through all these things, and then you kind of push yourself to get up to the mountaintop? What is it that you feel when you get there? Like, could you describe that feeling a little bit?
I think I feel proud of myself, and just saying it, and it chokes me up because I think those are some of the feelings that I've never allowed myself to have, right? That to be proud of myself has never, the things that I've done has never been for that reason, right? It's always been external. It's always been, again, I think I mentioned before, to prove somebody wrong or right. But it was never about me. And I think that euphoria, I think, is the sense of, right, that I'm doing this for myself, for my family, for my little universe around me, right? The families and that I'm creating around me that can relate, that can see, can sympathize, empathize, or what have you, all of those, and say, yeah, you know what, like, let's do this together, right? And I want to be a part of that, and I want to contribute those things that I feel like I've been contributing to everyone around me first. I've never felt like I deserved those things, and in that sense of pride for myself, I feel like I do deserve those things for myself too.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful, because I think, you know, for me, this question of walking and meditation and creating and engaging in the podcast is very connected to what you just said, which is, you know, in the US, and I guess perhaps in the Western, quote unquote, Western world, you're supposed to be aspiring for external achievement that is outside of your body. And over the last few years, as I mentioned, working through those traumas, you realize that it's the internal stuff that is what is rich and what is vast and what is abundant. And for me, it's like walking meditation. I've had those moments of euphoria too. That's why I asked you, Danny. So thanks for sharing that of bliss. And sometimes we don't meditate on that, you know? And so I definitely recommend kind of like try to get, like, when you can access that feeling now that you've already accessed it without having to go to the mountaintop in your meditation. Something that I've been learning to do, like, how do I sit and channel that feeling that I've already felt right now?
I like that.
And so for me, it's like, you know, walking is about the interior. It's about it's an activity of the internal. Even as I'm walking outside, it's about kind of, and it's pretty simple too, paying attention to like the leaves, paying attention to if there's a light breeze, listening to it, paying attention to trees, how strong trees are and how long they've been around. There's some trees in my neighborhood that I know have been here longer than some of the houses, just how strong they are. Walking by houses where, and I think about this a lot, where because we are living in a hotspot right now in the world, I think about, you know, families in like what's going on in each house, and hopefully they're okay. And I really think of it as a kind of, I think of walking meditation as a form of activism that is about activity for myself, but that also harms no one. And when I think about, what happened at the Capitol a few weeks ago, what is quote unquote like activism? What does that look like? And I think harm is really important to me. Like engaging in activities that as Thich Nhat Hanh talks about, walk as if every footstep is kissing the earth, and that's about not walking so fast. And it also helps me connect with the internal community. Even the way we oftentimes think about community as external, right? Like community is people who are, family, students, right? There's also another community that we often neglect. And we had talked about earlier, and I think we're going to talk about this more in another episode, alcohol and these things. We have this internal community that we oftentimes neglect, which is our body's internal mechanisms, right? Our heart is part of our community. Our lungs is part of our community. Our intestines are part of our community. Our lungs are part of our community. Our veins, all of those things are community. And that's about like flesh and nurturing that. And I think doing activities that activate that, that's also a form of activism. That's not just like a cheap, cute, cliche thing to say. It's really serious when you've had some serious health issues. And, doing those things gently so that like we can kind of process and filter those things out. And also, I think when you bring that into the classroom and when you talk about those things in the classroom, you're encouraging other people to be in touch with their internal community, to be healthy. And then that just creates a kind of vibrant, communities that are rooted in health too. And I think that's the only thing I can wish for everybody right now.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's one of the things too, when I start questioning whether or not I should be running, is I start thanking my feet, my legs, and then, my torso, and, my arms, and then my head, and then I start thanking, my mind and my spirit, right, for helping be a part of this healing, right, and or for being a part of this healing. Still, at times, Western mind makes me feel like I'm silly, like that's not something that you should be doing. That's silly. I feel ridiculous, doing that. But again, I feel like doing these things makes me happy, right? And so, I think again, maybe running and walking is not something that everybody can do, right? So, we welcome you to find your space of euphoria, right? Whatever you can do to find that space
Absolutely.
for yourself, whatever capacity you can, and to really find that, I think is what we're trying to do here, right? So maybe we could end by you maybe describing the same thing, the same question that you asked me, right? Like, how do you describe that euphoria?
I think I have a few things. I'm gonna go with the one that's closest in memory. It's when I moved back from Minnesota, I was always pretty, I guess the word, buzzed or high when I had time off, and I was just kind of like floating through time, and it's a quite addictive feeling. And there's this beautiful things that happens when I go on a walk. I lose myself in either a podcast, music, or a conversation with you. You and me, we always check in when we walk as well, or when we're out. And then I come home, I shower, and I meditate. I do a lot of meditation in the shower. When I get out of the shower, I put on my cremas, and I do this whole thing. Like, I oil my head, moisturize my head, crema all over, and then I just kind of like lay in bed. And I, through sobriety, doing things sober, I feel the sense of calm and relaxation, even if I'm angry or even if I'm really upset about something that's happening. There is a sense of calmness that I wouldn't even say neutralizes, but that now exists in relationship to my anger or my anxiety during this pandemic. And it's I wouldn't say it's euphoria, because it's very like I don't know why I don't think of euphoria as calming in my head. But so it's a little different than perhaps euphoria, but it's a sense of like tranquilidad. And I like the word tranquilo or tranquilidad because it's a little different. I guess it's tranquil in English, right? But it's just kind of like, okay, I did this thing that was good for me, and I meditated, I cleansed, and it's almost like I've built this other spiritual energy that can live with pain. And that's the only way. I think that's healing for me, which is I'm still a pretty angry and sad and depressed person and anxious, but it's my therapist calls it a new emotional baseline. I've been thinking of it as like a kind of new spiritual energy. So I can be angry, but also I did some things to make me feel calm, and it feels feels better than being high or buzzed, because it's not coming from a place of numbing, and it's very conscious. It's not, I don't even know why. Like one day I would be like, all right, let's go drink till we don't remember anything. Like I don't even know, like that was so subconsciously happening that this feels so much better because it's conscious and intentional. Difficult, and it's not like this magic thing like, oh, I fixed all my problems and now I don't have any emotions and I'm like levitating around the house. It's just that I've garnered a sense of calm that can help me be more aware of my emotions, and that's all I think I could ask for at this point. And that's nice, man. It's just like the nicest feeling. I try to do that before my classes too, to start the day. I was just working on my schedule for next week and what I want to do before one of my classes, and it's trying to kind of do that, because just a few years ago I was suffering from panic attacks and onset sudden anxiety, panic attacks, and it was bad when they would happen in the middle of class. I get so sweaty. Now I have this kind of spiritual energy, and so I can, all right, like I'm about to have a panic attack and I'm aware of it, and it's quite nice. It's like stillness in the midst of chaos.
Yeah, no, and I think being able to see those things are a part of those tools that we've never been taught or shown or exampled, right? Or what have you, that we're learning for each other, for ourselves, right? And I think that's powerful, right? To see those things from a different light, right? Because I think, they're going to be there forever, right? Those feelings are going to be there. But the way that we react to them, I think, as we start making our peace with these pasts, these traumas, right? These experiences, right? We're going to continue to learn, right? How to see them coming from far away and be like, all right, what's up?
And can I add something that you said earlier that I think is really important? Is it's happened twice today where I've been talking to someone and they say, like, I know it's in the Western mind, I know it's a little cheesy, right? Or you feel a little silly. I just want to, like, I just thought I made a big connection right now, and maybe it's not that big, but it's we've allowed corporations and governments to buy and sell the things that are essentially non-Western, non-white, Black and indigenous ways of knowing, to make us like we feel silly. But right, you pay attention to something that has to do with Disney and it says magic, right? Like Disney is magic, where magic happens, or the happiest place on earth, right? Or Coke, right? It's like selling happiness. Or Nike, just do it. Like they have all these cliches that everyone kind of like buys into, and maybe it doesn't necessarily feel it's like genuine, but those things are seen as legitimate. But yeah, like they're like, I think of like how I'm being honest because like I also understand, I know that feeling of feeling silly, right? But it's like, you know, all the things that Western world and the white world has taught us that is cliche or corny or cheesy is actually the shit that matters, right? Like we're not alone. Is that cheesy and a cliche? It's been repeated a lot, but that literally is one of the most political things that you could say, right? You're not an individual. You are part of a collective being and consciousness and life, and like thanking your body for helping you heal, like you were saying earlier. We don't acknowledge, like I think about the damage that I've done to my body when I wasn't sober, both like my external body and then like my internal body, which I wish I could look at. Sometimes I wish I could look at my liver and see it, like, like for like, you know what I mean? Like really see the damage, because I have some liver damage. And, and it's kind of like, thinking it is kind of like, perhaps, right? I mean, and this is something that I think, again, with non-Western knowledge, you can create new cells and new, molecular energies that, new kind of cells that come from a place of positivity. Because when we feel anxious and stuff, we sometimes get stomach aches, right? And it's like, it's all interconnected. So how do we decolonize and alchemize the stuff that's really cheesy and maybe like silly, but is bought and sold by all these companies that are selling you that in films and popular culture. But we all know those are real, and that's why those folks are like, we're gonna put a slogan on it, because we know those things are real. That's what's dangerous. I think they know that those things are an ethos, right? Like they have energy, and that's why in some ways, like they are really, that's why people invest in them. But never forget that those things can be decommodified. That's something that I think we have control over, because that's all indigenous knowledge. Magic and beauty, and nature, animals talking, like that's not Disney. Like communicating and talking to animals, so.
Now we welcome you to join us in honoring those that have transitioned from our physical world with a space of quiet. We invite you to breathe and sit still in that quiet. Once a brief, fleeting silence ends, Mario and I will share palabras with our ancestors. These two pensamientos emerge after walking meditation with the intent of connecting with our elders and ancestors who have passed.
El activismo no es solamente resistir, es el alma en movimiento con la naturaleza, it is also surrender, not to power, but to the depths of our spirit, to the ancestors who teach. Tampoco es diálogo perpetuo con los que nos abusan. Es aprender a hablar con el viento, escuchar lo que llora el cielo y comprender el ritmo de nuestros cuerpos. I went on a walk the other day. I saw a plane crossing the sky, and I remembered a story my abuelita Elena told me in the only trip she made to the US. When I was 5, she said, pointing to an airplane in the sky, "Mañana vas a volver a ver el cielo. Y ahí vas a ver un avión como este. Y ahí estaré yo, regresándome a donde vivo yo. No llores ni te pongas triste. Cada vez que veas el cielo, después de mañana, yo estaré allí, volviendo, visitando y regresando, yéndome a casa, pensando en ustedes, mis tesoros." On these walks, I contemplate death. I worry that the end is near, that this plague will visit me as it has visited so many people I care for. And when I contemplate death, I do not see heaven or hell. I see my abuelita Elena, knitting a pair of pajamas for me, rubbing cofal before bedtime, and sneaking un dulce de fresa, something sweet before bed. Yo solo la conocí en momentos, un verano al principio del nuevo siglo, y le sostení la mano cuando se fue. Pero ella sigue aquí conmigo, en un avión desde San José, Costa Rica, pero en realidad con mis raíces en Tabarcia. Ella vuelve entre la muerte y la vida, entre donde nací y donde vivo. What I learned from walks is that a little time can be an eternal pour. Her gentleness visits me and my cup overflows. My heart has to be unchained to open that door. And when I do, I can resemble her. El activismo no es solo resistir, ni tampoco una cuestión de solicitación institucional. Es movimiento interno, no el exterior. Es nuestra carne y el alma que se levanta y se cae. Had I known that writing a bit of poetry would bring me tranquilidad, I would have stopped drinking a lot of time ago. But from one flow to the other, every word a step, every step a meditation, whether at the top of the mountain or the crossroads of 3 intersections of a boulevard. Here we are.
Lyrics to Murciélago and Tsunami by Porter. Murciélago. Ay, qué calor. Quiero vomitar este dolor. Cansado voy desde caminar tan largo. Voy a volar con el ave sagrada. Guíame, Quetzal, viájame al final. Salgan al mar, les suplico. Los abuelos lo habían visto. No vienen en paz, se oyen gritos. Hay 3 naves, traen a Cristo. Guíame, Quetzal, viájame al final. Salgan al mar, les suplico. Hay 3 naves, traen a Cristo. No vienen en paz, se oyen gritos. Los abuelos lo habían visto. Viájame al final, viájame al final. Tsunami. Azul, dentro del mar, solo espera. Escucha voces etéreas, eternas. Kuksasum. De las tinieblas surgen respuestas. Fuertes tormentas llegan, falsas sirenas, bellas promesas. Sol de la sexta llega, nacidos para crear, hijos de la galaxia y de esta tierra. Decían nuestros ancestros, todos somos maya. Cuatlique o la serpiente vive en las montañas, allá en el Anahuac. Kutsaksum. Azul, dentro del mar, solo espera. Escucha voces etéreas, eternas. Kutsaksum. In the summer of 2018, I began a prayer asking for my ancestors to light my path. I asked for guidance through the forest of doubt, anxiety, fear, low self-esteem. I asked for the strength and courage to confront those traumas I inherited and experienced in my life, and now, finally, to begin the healing process. I began by doing things that made me happy. I played basketball, lifted weights, spent intentional time with myself. I meditated. Because that force in my mind was still very scary for me, I would always put on my headphones full blast, listening to music that made me reflect. I created a playlist called Un Rezo to dedicate the energies that I was exerting to my healing and those in my world. With music blasting, I would try to meditate the best that I could, because I was still too terrified to be alone with my thoughts. But still, I try. And I search for a past I need to confront and embrace, and to finally let go of the pain. Palapa, te volveré a encontrar. Quizás no volveré jamás. Te volveré a encontrar. Quizás te encontré en alta mar. I know these traumas will always be with me. By now I am ready to not allow them to dictate my existence, porque ya no puedo negar mis pasos en este camino rojo. One day, listening to suggested music in my music app, an album titled Moctezuma by Porter was sent to me that hugged my soul. It was one of those earth-shaking moments that would make you question everything you ever thought you knew. Murciélago by Porter pounded its way into my psyche with a huehue beat that reminded me when I would speak to my ancestors through danza. Murciélago, ay qué calor, quiero vomitar este dolor. Cansado voy desde caminar tan largo. I felt like the ancestors I was speaking to every day were now speaking back, and it filled me with light. Murciélago, voy a volar con la lava sagrada, guíame Quetzal. This is what I've been asking for. In this prayer, I was always asking for an ancestor to be sent to me here on earth that can guide me through this forest. But this new voice told me that I could be my own guide. I feel like I'm learning to be an ancestor. As the pandemic stopped the world, I no longer could do those self-care practices, and I began walking or running as a prayer. Always drawn to the mountain, I would walk the trail with the San Gabriel Mountains in view. Tsunami. Cuatlico y la serpiente vive en las montañas, allá en el Anahuac, Kutsaksum. I can feel Cuatlico en las montañas. The end of the trail gives me a beautiful view of the San Gabriel Valley. I stop to give thanks to the 4 directions, and I keep asking my ancestors to light my path as I continue to search for peace in my soul. Palapa. Ahí muy cerca donde duerme el sol en el mar, donde las nubes visten de colores, donde el horizonte con calma anuncia el alba, donde las estrellas brillan nada más.
Thank you for sharing your time and inviting us into your day here at the Alchemist Manifesto. We invite you to check out previous and future episodes. We're putting together a playlist on Apple and Spotify of songs referenced and or discussed in the podcast. There's a song that this podcast inspired you to listen to. Please let us know because we'd love to add it to our playlist. Or feel free to share your thoughts, responses, and questions about the podcast via direct message on Instagram at The Alchemist Manifesto or via email thealchemistmanifesto@gmail.com. You could also leave us a voice message if you're listening to us on the Anchor app. We'd love to hear from you.
A reminder that if you feel stuck, from the mud grows a lotus. A special shout out to Jaime Talavera, JT on SoundCloud, for the musical intro and outro to our podcast. To Yoel Ureñamura at yoel.design on Instagram for your work on our social media. We appreciate you both. Mil gracias to Reina Rodriguez for listening to us while you worked on your syllabi. To Stephanie Rivera, who connected our discussion of finding our light in the face of imposter syndrome. To Brie Perez, whose amistad is why they listened. To Genesee Haro for listening and sharing your kind words. To Katie Levine, who aims to center love in their work, and to everyone who has listened, for whatever reason, whether walking, working, or unwinding, we are eternally grateful.